Do you want the good news or the bad news? I'm gonna tell you what to take and what not to take. The bad news is there's a lot of just unsavory products that are out there, unsavory characters that just try to sell complicated nonsense that really doesn't do much. The good news is the stuff that works is usually really cheap and really simple. So we're gonna talk fat loss and muscle building, and we're gonna break down what works the best. Let's start in the fat burning category. Do take caffeine. Caffeine is the most researched ergogenic aid, the most researched fat loss aid, and it works. It works because of cyclic adenosine monophosphate, it works because it mobilizes fat, and it works because it gets you moving. Let's not undermine the most important thing. It gets you moving, which is going to be one of the biggest levers that you can pull. So if you're looking for fat loss, the cheapest, most effective thing you can take is caffeine. Don't take Thermogenics, expensive fat burning supplements that claim they will increase your body temperature. When you look at the big matrix, or the simple matrix, of overall fat loss and how many calories you burn, the biggest bucket of calories that you burn is your simple basal metabolic rate, what it takes to be alive in the first place, whether you are laying in bed or walking around, okay? Then next up, we have your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Generally speaking, this is the next biggest category. Some people it's different, but generally speaking, that's how much when you fidget, when you walk around, when you park in the parking lot, walk to the grocery store. Then you have your exercise-induced thermogenesis. This is like your actual effect of activity and exercise, deliberate exercise. Then on top of that, you've got a tiny little bit that is the thermic effect of food. And just to demonstrate how weak this is, like that thermic effect of food is like a fraction, like it's just a couple % of your overall calories burned. So the thermic effect, like you could increase your core body temperature an entire degree and it's not going to change that much compared to if you just went out for a run, right? I mean, if you wanted to just sit on the couch, and if you've ever heard of that stuff, DNP, that's basically what it does. Like, yeah, you could burn some fat. That's not safe and that's not realistic. Basic thermogenics, like, you're talking such a small amount. If it actually had a realistic impact on your core metabolic rate, don't you think that we would be using that in clinical settings? But we have practically zero implication of thermogenics in a clinical setting in obesity medicine. So it just makes no sense. Do take a green tea extract. Why? Because it's cheap, it has caffeine in it, and the catechins seem to have a powerful impact on what's called AMPK. It might actually help you burn more fat. It might increase brown adipose tissue, but it does have caffeine and the catechins are good for fat loss too. Next, don't use, or at least use caution with just jumping to semaglutide. Okay, don't just go on a GLP-1 receptor agonist. The reason is because you will just slow down your eating. That's going to reduce your calories overall, but it's also going to reduce your protein intake. You'll probably lose lean body mass with it, but more importantly, there's alteration of dopamine signaling that occurs. And when you come off of that stuff, it's easy to go right back into eating even more than you were before. So use a lot of caution there. The stuff works, but its goal was not intended to be a weight loss compound. It was to help with insulin function. And even though it's somewhat off-label for weight loss and it works, it's not the best route to go for long term. And this is gonna fly in the face of some, use carnitine. Now there's a little bit of a caveat here. A lot of people say carnitine does not work because our body produces it anyway. So like, we don't need carnitine from the diet. Well, first of all, like lysine and methionine make up carnitine, like, or are important for carnitine. So if your diet's deficient in those, like meat, you're probably not gonna get a lot of carnitine. But if you're training at 75% more of your VO2 max, there's a good chance that you can deplete as much as 80% of your carnitine stores. This means that when you reduce carnitine that much, you have just gotten rid of the rate limiting step for fat oxidation to occur. If you deplete carnitine levels all the way, it's going to be really hard to create carnitine palmitoyltransferase 1, which shuttles fat into the mitochondria. So the asterisk that goes by carnitine is if you are training hard. If you're training hard, carnitine is a viable supplement for fat loss. Don't take something called raspberry ketones. They are a colossal joke, and for some reason they're making a little bit of a comeback. They are 90 to 95% excreted in the urine, and they have pretty much no impact on the metabolism whatsoever. Do consider Yohimbine or Rauwolscine, which is kind of the same category. What these are alpha-2 antagonists. They block the alpha-2 adrenergic receptors, the A2 adrenergic receptors. What this means is that they essentially instigate lipolysis to occur at that level. They kind of manipulate adrenaline a little bit in that way. So when you block an adrenergic receptor, it sort of triggers a fat loss cascade. But there's also effects of Rauwolscine and Yohimbine on appetite suppression. So very powerful from both categories, but we're not doing it in such a way like we are with GLP-1. Let's pivot over to the muscle building side for a second. I'm gonna start with what not to take. Use caution with beef protein powders. Not because they're gonna do anything bad, but because a lot of them, now I must digress, there are some good ones out there, but most of them are just using hooves and hides and things like that to get the certain aminos high enough to be able to constitute a certain protein amount on a label. Here's something interesting to look at, like collagen. Collagen is great, okay, tremendous. If you look at a collagen label, something interesting is there. Like you'll see it says, 10 grams of protein. But if you look at the recommended daily value, and I learned this from Mark Sisson, it actually says 0%. And that's because it's not a complete protein, but it still constitutes as a protein value on the nutrition label, but not towards your RDA. What that means is they can call it a protein all day long, but it doesn't actually count towards your RDA. With beef protein powders, a lot of times it's mostly collagen, and you're not getting a complete protein. So it's almost weird amino, and then they might throw some leucine in there to amino spike it. So there's some nefarious characters in the world of beef protein. So what you do take is good old-fashioned whey protein. Whey protein isolate or whey protein concentrate. I understand that some people are lactose intolerant and they might opt for beef protein in that case. If you're lactose intolerant, maybe you should consider even a plant-based protein powder, a good quality beef protein, or just eat real food. The next one that is a do is do take creatine. And there's no need for expensive creatine ethyl esters and crealkalins and stuff like that. Good old-fashioned creatine monohydrate. It's simple, it's basic, and next to caffeine, it's the most researched ergogenic aid. Reductions in inflammation, increase in strength, increases in power, increases in explosivity, increases in performance, indirect links to muscle building as a result of increasing some of the potential protein synthesis signaling that occurs as a result of the increases in strength. I put a link down below for 15% off of my preferred creatine company, which is called Create. They're creatine gummies. One thing you do need to know is that if you want to control water retention, that is a real thing with creatine, taking smaller doses throughout the day seems to be effective. When I had Dr. Darren Kando on this channel talking about creatine, we really did kind of get into that. And that seems to be an effective strategy. So taking 5 grams per day, but split at 1 to 2 gram intervals throughout the day. And these little gummies make it possible. So they're trying to destigmatize creatine. It's good for women. It's good for even teenagers. It's safe, and the literature suggests that and supports that. So that link down below, you will not regret it. This is a great way to low dose all the way up to high dose creatine in an effective delivery form that tastes good. So creatine gummies from Create down below, top line of the description, use that code and save 15% off. Don't take cheap test boosters. Testosterone boosters are generally using herbs or stuff that have zero efficacious dose or research behind them. They're just garbage. They are making crazy claims from weird in vitro things. Not to say that there aren't halfway decent ones out there. When I was a teenager, I remember taking wild yam extract, and it kind of worked, right? And even Tribulus has some benefits to it. Okay, there are effects, but I don't think that you're getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to building muscle. You are much better off implementing lifestyle measures to increase your testosterone, and eating some meat and eating some eggs and squatting and being active to increase your testosterone levels. Now, a lot of these things also, when you look at test boosters, they just have ZMA in them, like zinc, magnesium aspartate. So take some zinc. That is one of the strongest minerals that you can take for testosterone anyway. I just hate to see people wasting tons of money on random test boosters when there's actually evidence behind the basics. Do take beta-alanine. Now, this isn't going to necessarily increase muscle. However, there is some preliminary research suggesting it might help with that. But what it is going to do is it's going to help buffer the hydrogen ions so you can push through a little bit more. So if you normally fatigue at 12 reps and you could never squeak out a 13th or 14th or 15th rep because the burn is so intense, you might find with beta-alanine you can push past that. And the reason behind that is beta-alanine buffers the hydrogen ions, but it doesn't really do that. It increases carnosine, which buffers the hydrogen ions. So carnosine is an amino acid that is required for the buffering of hydrogen. Okay, so what happens is when lactate accumulates, it creates sort of this cascade that increases hydrogen ions, that increases acidity, that creates the burn, that makes it so you cannot continue any further. Beta-alanine has robust research behind it. It's super inexpensive. It's in most pre-workouts, but you could get it cheap independently from like bulk supplements or just Amazon. Experiment with different doses, like 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams. Seems to be really effective. You might even get a little tingle, and we all like to tingle, so it's kind of fun. Okay, one that you don't want to take is glutamine. Glutamine, there is some weird esoteric research when it comes to endurance work and like gut health. And I think there's merit there, but we also have to be cautious of two things. One, I'm gonna, at the risk of sounding a little woo-woo-y, is cancer cells are fueled a lot of times by glutamine. I think that's something we should pay attention to. And it's not talked about in the bodybuilding or sport community, but a lot of cancers are fueled by glutamine, and that glutamine cycle is not something we wanna mess with. So that aside though, glutamine is not an essential amino acid. It is not a rate limiting factor in building muscle. So being deficient in glutamine isn't necessarily going to decrease your ability to have muscle protein synthesis. So from a muscle building perspective, because they say it will induce recovery, no, this is a perfect example of a single amino acid that is just part of an amino acid pool. Go eat a chicken breast. Go eat some food and get some glutamine, and it will go to the amino acid pool. And if you're deficient in glutamine, eat some more chicken. As a matter of fact, there's a study that was published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology that found in a muscle building sense, when they compared glutamine supplementation to maltodextrin, there was no difference. I would even argue that maltodextrin might stimulate more muscle because it's high glycemic, so don't do it, but it's kind of interesting. Next up is taurine. Taurine is really interesting. I'm about to have a really esteemed researcher in this field come on this channel. Taurine is a powerful antioxidant. And there are multiple studies that are now demonstrating. There's a 2021 study, I can't remember the journal right offhand, but we could probably find it and put it in the video or the show notes. Basically, taurine increased time to exhaustion, improved trial times, increased VO2 max, all these other factors, increased strength, power. Why? Because it is a potent antioxidant at that level in that moment. So it is one of the most powerful in-moment ergogenic aids that you can take, and we're seeing more and more research coming out on it. And all you need is between 1 and 6 grams. So where does this come into play with building muscle? Well, if you can push it harder, then there's obvious research there, okay? But there's also indirect effects that it might have on protein signaling as well. Another one that I consider a do is essential amino acids. I think this is a great strategy. Essential amino acids do increase the availability of proteins, so they do make it so you can potentially get more out of your protein. I don't think there's something you can live on. I don't think by drinking them throughout the day you're saving any more catabolism or you're sparing muscle in any way, but I do think that you can get a little bit more of that leucine that you might need from like a protein shake. Add some EAAs to your chicken breast, you have them on the side. Occasionally have them to get a little leucine spike and get that insulin spike that's pro-growth. At the very least, you might get a little benefit out of it, but it's certainly worth it. And it's much more worth it than this one that I suggest not taking, BCAAs. EAAs are essential amino acids. BCAAs, other than leucine, like you don't really have anything that's required. BCAAs, they make a lot of sense because they are what are called the branched chain amino acids that are very critical, but they're not essential. We can get them from the diet, we do get them from the diet, and we get them in plentiful amounts from the diet, unless you are potentially vegan or vegetarian, more so vegan, and you're doing a really flimsy vegan diet, living on Pop-Tarts and Oreos, which I know a lot of people do, so don't do that. But EAAs are the way to go. The BCAAs, I think we're finding more and more that these are just not the way to go. And the last thing that does have some merit with muscle building is good old Tongkat Ali as a supplement that could improve your testosterone levels, decrease your estrogen levels, and improve your SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. I took it at like 600 milligrams and it was working. I had such a DHT conversion that I had to stop taking it because I was getting hair loss from it. I've talked about that a lot. Highly effective, but some people might be very sensitive to it. I would defer you to someone like Derek from More Plates, More Dates, or someone like that to talk a little bit more about that, as he's really an expert in that category. Or I'll link out to some of the videos that I've done talking about Tongkat Ali. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.